It's strange how silence can feel loud. The kind of silence that doesn't just sit in the room. It presses on your skin, gets under your clothes, and coils around your spine like a whisper you're not supposed to hear. That's what my birthday dinner felt like. We were seated at the long mahogany table in the private lounge of a high-end restaurant that Mira insisted on booking. Candlelight flickered between us like little flames trying to warn me. I should have seen it then, but I smiled. I played the role. Happy birthday to me. Everyone was there. Mira dressed in soft gold with her smile just a little too perfect. My sister Marcy with her nose in her glass. My parents on either side of me. My cousin Nina fake laughing at everything Silas said. And Silas himself, my older brother, charming as always, lounging in the seat right next to my wife as if it had been reserved just for him. And maybe it had. He looked like he just came back from vacation. Fresh tan teeth too white, watch flashing under the dimmed lights like it had something to say. I knew that watch. I bought it. Or, rather, my credit card had it. The charge was small enough to pass as one of Myra's random gifts for someone. But it hadn't been for me. I sat there surrounded by people who shared my blood, shared my table, but not my loyalty. I could feel it in the way Mira leaned toward Silas, in the way he brushed her fingers when reaching for the wine. No one said anything. No one needed to. They weren't hiding it anymore. They were easing me into the role of the fool, and I'd had enough of pretending. The waiter poured my wine. I barely touched it. I was watching Myra's hands, the way they rested just so on her napkin. Relaxed, confident. The hands of a woman who thought she'd already won. The room dimmed just a little more. My father stood up, glass in hand. I expected him to say something like, "Happy birthday, son," or "Proud of you," something a father should say, something mine never really did. Instead, he said, "Let's raise a glass to maturity." I didn't blink, didn't flinch. I just kept watching. My sister chimed in to modern arrangements and letting go of outdated ideas. There was laughter, forced, nervous, as if they knew they were crossing a line but figured I'd be too stunned or too polite to stop them. Then Mira stood. She turned to me, taking my hand gently, as if her touch could smooth over the nail she'd hammered in. "We think it's time," she said softly, "that you stop being so traditional." I blinked. Just once. Then I smiled. I looked up and I gave the signal. It was small, just 2 fingers brushing my cufflink. Nobody in the family noticed, but 4 of the waiters did because they weren't waiters. In less than 10 seconds, the temperature of the room changed. The kind of shift you can't quite name, but everyone feels like a storm arriving without thunder. One by one, the waiters stepped forward, calm, steady, no plates, no menus. Enzo, the lead, stepped beside me and said clearly but respectfully, "Mr. Walsh, would you like us to proceed?" I nodded. That was when Myra's smile faltered. She looked at Enzo, then back at me. "What's going on?" I didn't answer her. Not yet. The lights dimmed again, this time not for mood but for purpose. The projector screen lowered slowly from the ceiling, smooth as silk, casting a ghostly glow across the table. "What is this?" Silas asked, trying to laugh. "Some kind of movie?" My cousin looked uncomfortable. My mother started whispering something to my father, but no one moved. No one stopped it. because deep down they knew this was no birthday surprise. This was the curtain rising. Myra's hand slipped from mine. The first image appeared, not a slideshow of childhood photos or fond memories. No, this was a freeze frame. Mira and Silas sitting side by side at the vineyard's cabin porch, her legs over his. A moment of intimacy caught in perfect clarity. Someone gasped. Then the screen went dark again, only to show a short video clip. Myra's voice echoed through the room. He still has no clue. Sometimes I think he likes being blind. My mother stood abruptly. Turn this off. This isn't appropriate. But no one moved, and I certainly didn't. I stood slowly, adjusted my sleeves, and looked around at the faces that used to mean something to me. Then I looked at Mira. You wanted me to be more open-minded, I said softly. You wanted me to accept the new definition of marriage, of love, of loyalty. Her eyes were wide now, the same eyes that used to cry when I held her during thunderstorms, the same eyes that now held panic instead of guilt. You all wanted to toast to maturity, I continued, to evolution. And I was expected to sit quietly and smile like a good little husband. Silas pushed back his chair. You're blowing this out of proportion. No, I said sharply. You're used to getting away with things because no one ever calls you out. Because you think money gives you immunity. Because this family made excuses for you your whole life. Silas opened his mouth, but I cut him off. I loved you both, I said, but I will never love a lie. Then I turned to the rest of them. Tonight wasn't a celebration. It was a performance, and I gave you all front row seats. The room stayed frozen. Not one person clapped. Not one person spoke. I leaned down, picked up the envelope Enzo handed me, and slid it across the table to Mira. Inside were divorce papers, pre-signed, ironclad. She didn't open them, just stared at the envelope like it might burn her fingers. Then I turned to Silas. You'll find your surprise in the envelope your lawyer receives tomorrow. No one moved. I turned toward the door. I'm done, I said, and I walked out, leaving behind the candles, the cake, and the illusion of family. The lie was broken, and finally, so was I. But not in the way they'd hoped. I didn't break down. I broke free. The scent hit me first. It was a mix of bergamot, musk, and something faintly smoky, something expensive, something not mine. It clung to her like a second skin, floating through the hallway when she walked in, seeping into the cushions of the couch as she dropped her purse and kicked off her heels like she'd had the longest day in the world. She gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, barely grazing skin, and smiled that tired smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Tiffick was insane, she said, loosening her scarf. I need a shower. I stood in the kitchen holding a mug of coffee I no longer wanted, watching her, listening. It smelled. God, it wouldn't let go. And I knew exactly where I'd smelled it before. Silas, his cologne. It was the one he wore to every family event. Always so strong it lingered in the air long after he'd left, like a signature. I remembered once complimenting it just to be polite. He said it cost more than my rent. I never forgot that. Now here it was on her, on Mira. I said nothing, not because I didn't want to, but because I needed to know more before I spoke. I needed to be sure. I couldn't accuse her, not yet. Not based on perfume and paranoia. So I swallowed my anger, let it burn quietly down my throat like cheap whiskey, and I smiled. You okay? I asked, keeping my tone light. She nodded without looking at me. Just tired. I'll be upstairs. And just like that, she was gone. I stood there for a long time after the shower started, listening to the water run, imagining her scrubbing him off her skin, imagining her humming as if nothing was wrong. I poured my coffee down the sink and opened a window. The air was too thick to breathe. That night, I lay next to her in bed. Her back was to me, her body curled around a pillow. I watched the ceiling, heard the steady tick of the clock, counted every second between her breaths. I knew, but knowing wasn't proof. Not yet. The next few days were a blur of silence and small talk. I became a man split in two, the one who smiled over dinner and asked about her day, and the one who checked her phone when she was in the shower, who traced her steps with quiet obsession. I wasn't proud of it, but betrayal changes something in a man. It rots the foundation of trust. Makes you start seeing cracks in every wall you once leaned on. Then came the laugh. We were sitting in the living room. She was on the couch scrolling through her phone. I was pretending to read, but I wasn't seeing any of the words, just listening. Always listening. Suddenly she giggled sharp and sudden, the kind of laugh she used to have around me, the kind that used to make me feel like I'd said something brilliant. "What's funny?" I asked casually. She looked up like she forgot I was even there. "Oh, it's nothing," she said too quickly. "Just Silas sent me a stupid meme." "A meme?" "Silas." She smiled down at the phone again, typing something fast with her thumbs. I watched her screen tilt slightly toward her chest as if by instinct. The next morning I checked our shared cloud storage. We had an old habit of syncing photos and backups from our phones. Most of it was innocent groceries, screenshots of articles, selfies. But tucked between two food pics was a photo of Mira and Silas at a vineyard. My vineyard. It was mine. The one I had inherited from my grandfather. A quiet little patch of land I'd been trying to restore on weekends. Mira said she hated going, said it was too far, too rustic. And there she was in a sundress I'd never seen. Silas's arm draped lazily around her shoulders. She was laughing. He was staring straight into the camera like he owned the whole world. It made my stomach twist. And still, I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed more than instinct. I needed certainty. I needed something they couldn't deny or explain away. So I made a call to the only person I trusted without question. Cyrus, my best friend since we were 12. The one who had seen me through every bad haircut, every failed job interview, every family disaster. He didn't ask questions when I said I needed help. "I need proof," I told him. He just said, "What's the budget?" I told him there wasn't one. He put me in touch with someone, a man named Enzo, ex-private security. Quiet, precise, and thorough. He didn't blink when I told him what I suspected. Within 3 days, I had access to footage, audio recordings, GPS locks, hotel receipts, and the truth hit me harder than I thought it would. This wasn't a one-time lapse. This wasn't a drunken mistake. This was a full-blown deliberate betrayal woven into weeks, maybe months of planning and secrecy. There were calls, long calls between Mira and Silas. There were transfers from our joint account to a private one I didn't recognize. There were photos of them together in places I never knew they went. One clip in particular stayed with me. It was Silas's voice, smug and careless. She thinks he's too soft to notice. Honestly, I do too. Then Mira replied, laughing, "He's like a loyal dog. He won't bite even if you kick him." My hand shook playing that one. I replayed it once, twice, 10 times. Then I stopped. Not because I couldn't handle it, but because I had what I needed. The truth. Not just of the betrayal, but of how little they thought of me, of how long this must have been going on, and worst of all, that it wasn't just them. Because slowly, painfully, I began to see the cracks in everyone else. My father brushing off my questions. My sister saying things like, "Well, Mira does have needs." Even my own mother once joked, "Silas and Mira have great chemistry. You should be grateful she's not bored." It wasn't just a betrayal between two people. It was a betrayal sanctioned by the very people who were supposed to protect me. Family. Blood. That was the moment I stopped thinking like a husband and started thinking like a strategist. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and I began to plan. I didn't want revenge. I wanted clarity. I wanted them to see what I saw, feel what I felt, not in anger, but in silence, in undeniable, crystal-clear silence. Because sometimes silence isn't weakness. It's the space where power gathers. And I was done being soft. It's a strange thing pretending to be blind when your eyes are wide open. Every smile I gave her after that night felt like a mask I had to staple to my face. Every dinner, every casual conversation, every "I love you," she whispered in passing. I took it, nodded, and stored it away like a receipt I'd one day need to present in court. Mira had no idea I knew, and that gave me the one advantage I'd never had before: control. I had spent years shrinking around Silas, years of being the quiet one, the sensible one, the brother who was supposed to be grateful he was even allowed at the table. But something broke when I heard that recording of her laughing about me being a loyal dog. Something sharp woke up inside me, and it was done playing fetch. I didn't want to confront them in a hallway. That would be too easy. I didn't want screaming or furniture thrown. No, I wanted the truth served cold, carefully plated in front of every fork and napkin they used to mock me behind. So, I decided their stage would become my theater. The performance would take place on my 37th birthday. Mira had already been planning it, of course. She loved throwing events, not because she enjoyed celebration, but because it gave her the spotlight. She said we needed something classy but intimate. She meant something expensive, a place where people would talk, post photos, compliment her taste in lighting and canapes. I let her talk through the venue options, pretended to be indecisive until she chose the restaurant I had already bought shares in 2 months ago. That part made me laugh quietly. She sent out invitations, a guest list with all the usual suspects: my parents, my sister, my cousin Nina, Silas. Always Silas. She even added his name with a winking emoji in the group chat. Of course, the golden boy has to be there. I gave her a thumbs up. She kissed my cheek. "You're being so chill about this. Growth looks good on you." Growth. That word again. The same word my father had used in his ridiculous toast. Growth didn't look good on me. It looked dangerous on me. I had already contacted Cyrus by then, told him I needed surveillance footage, phone backups, and something more theatrical. He didn't ask questions, just replied, "You want drama? Let's write a script they'll never forget." We met in person at a late-night diner, the kind of place that didn't ask why 2 men were hunched over a notebook, sketching out social warfare over cold coffee. You want them all exposed? Cyrus asked. Not all at once, I replied. Let them feel it unravel, piece by piece, like fabric, tearing. I handed him a printed list. At the top was Silas, then Mira, then my mother, then the rest. I want roles filled, quiet ones, people who can blend in. Waitstaff, bartenders, security. I want footage. I want reaction shots. I want to own that room before they even walk in. He nodded slowly. You're planning a takedown, not a breakup. I didn't smile. They planned it first. Over the next 2 weeks, I became two people. By day, I was the husband Mira believed she tamed. I complimented her dresses. I pretended not to notice how she changed her phone passcode. I nodded when she said Silas was just helping with the guest list logistics. By night, I was something else entirely. I met with Enzo, the retired detective Cyrus had introduced me to. He was blunt and efficient, and he didn't like small talk. I like that about him. I've got audio, video, account links, he said one night, handing me a flash drive in a paper envelope. Do you want it all laid out? Yes, I said, sliding the drive into my jacket pocket. I want it chronological. I want timestamps. I want to build a case they can't weasel out of. He nodded. Then I'll need access to her email. You'll have it by morning. And I made sure he did. While Mira slept beside me, I unlocked her phone with the Face ID she'd forgotten was still synced to our backup. I logged into her email on my device, sent the credentials to Enzo, deleted my tracks, and I watched her sleep. The soft rise and fall of her breath, the lips that used to say my name like it meant something. I wondered who she was dreaming about. Silas, probably. Maybe about the future she thought she'd have once I was pushed aside quietly. I didn't feel rage in that moment. Just a hollow ache, like something had been stolen and replaced with cold air. But I wasn't here to cry. I was here to prepare. Every detail of the party became a chess piece. The table arrangement, I changed it through the restaurant manager. I now controlled the lighting adjusted to allow for perfect video clarity. The music, time for breaks when key footage would play. Even the dessert menu became part of the game. Mira had chosen chocolate soufflé. I replaced it with something bitter, dark, symbolic. Then I began inviting my own guests, people no one recognized, a lawyer, a silent videographer, a financial auditor, all posing as friends from work or distant cousins. Each of them given roles, each of them carrying a copy of the truth. By the time Mira printed place cards and double-checked floral arrangements, I had already rewritten the ending to her story. She thought she was planning a celebration. I was planning an execution. A soft one, elegant, dignified, the kind that hurts more than shouting ever could. It's funny how often they called me weak because I didn't yell, because I forgave easily, because I showed up when no one else did. But silence isn't softness, and kindness is not permission. I waited. I played along. I let her pick the wine, let her rehearse the toast she thought she'd give about modern love and maturity. And as she ordered a fresh suit for me, I was having custom documents printed on fine linen paper. One for her, one for Silas, one for every person who dared raise a glass while spitting in mine. This wasn't just a party anymore. It was a reckoning. And the best part, she handed me the stage herself. You ever sit in a room full of people and realize you're the only one who doesn't know the joke? That was me. Not once, not twice, but for months. Every gathering, every family dinner, every weekend brunch where Mira casually disappeared for an hour to call her mother. Every time Silas showed up uninvited, and everyone acted like it was just coincidence. It was never a coincidence. It was coordination. I didn't start connecting the pieces until a night in early March when my cousin Mina came over to borrow a wine opener. She always forgot hers, or at least pretended to. She was tipsy before she arrived, laughing at things I didn't say. I was too glossy to notice how tired I'd become from pretending I didn't notice anything. I saw Mira and Silas at the vineyard the other day, she said, pulling off her heels the way drunk people do clumsily and like it's a rebellion. You guys doing some kind of wine tasting thing now? My body went still. The vineyard? I asked carefully. She nodded, flopping onto her couch. Yeah, your place in Soma. Mira was wearing that long blue dress. Looked like a magazine shoot. Silas said you were meeting them later. I didn't say anything because I wasn't. I never even knew she'd been there. Naw didn't even catch it. She just kept scrolling on her phone, humming to herself, blissfully unaware that she'd just handed me another piece of the puzzle. That night, after she left, I went into our shared Dropbox account. Mira and I used to upload vacation photos, house remodel ideas. There it was, that same blue dress, that same vineyard. A picture of Mira standing next to Silas in front of the wooden tasting deck I had hand-built myself. Silas's arm was around her waist. Her hand was on his chest. The caption, "Golden Hour." It wasn't public, just saved quietly in the archive, like a memory they didn't want to share but couldn't quite delete. And that's when it hit me. They weren't hiding it. They didn't have to because everyone already knew. Everyone except me. I started testing the waters after that, asking casual questions, innocent things, phrased gently so I didn't spook anyone. At dinner with my mother, I said, "You think Myra's been spending too much time with Silas?" She stirred her tea, not even blinking. She just needs someone more stimulating. That was it. No denial, no surprise, just a tiny little stab slipped between the words, delivered like it was her way of saying, "We expected this." And that word stimulating, that didn't come from nowhere. That was something she'd heard Mira say, or Silas, or both. The next morning I called my father, said I wanted to talk business. We met for coffee downtown. He looked tired like he always does when he knows he has to tolerate me for more than 10 minutes. "I'm thinking about selling part of the vineyard," I said, watching his expression closely. He didn't react, just sipped his espresso and said, "You should ask Silas first. He's been more involved lately." More involved? Right. I nodded, pretending like that made sense. "Do you think Myra is helping him with that?" My father shrugged. "There are don'ts. Don't get insecure about it." That was the phrase that broke something. Don't get insecure about it. Like the problem wasn't betrayal. It was my ego. That night, I went home and didn't speak a word to Mira. She didn't notice. She was on the phone with someone, probably him, laughing in that breathy, soft way she used to laugh when we were still new. I sat in my office and stared at the framed photo of our wedding. Funny how everyone in the picture had been complicit. My sister Marcy, who used to call me every week, now only texted when she needed something. She'd once joked at brunch, "Mira and Silas could pass as models together." Huh? I thought it was just teasing. Now I realized it was foreshadowing. Even my best man Joel had said something at the wedding, something that felt harmless at the time. Silas seems to really like Mira. Hope he doesn't steal her one day. Everyone laughed except me, and now I realized why. They weren't joking. They were easing me into the story they'd already written without me. So, I stopped asking questions, stopped pretending I was part of the club, and I started writing my own story. You ever sit in a room and realize everyone there would rather protect a liar than speak the truth? That's when you learn what loneliness really feels like. But something else came with it. Clarity. They thought I was small, quiet, forgiving, gullible. They didn't know I used to run a company with over 200 employees, that I managed 5 international accounts, that I had read hundreds of contracts, caught dozens of hidden clauses, and negotiated mergers that made millionaires out of people who now pretended I wasn't worth listening to. So I stopped being the husband, and I started being the man they underestimated. I cut the smiles, cut the babe. Do you want tea? Tone. I gave Mira exactly what she wanted. Space. I let her plan her little dinner. Let her believe I was healing. Let her imagine a future where I quietly accepted whatever arrangement she and Silas had cooked up in their vineyard of lies. But every day I was building, not just a case, a mirror. One big, crystal-clear mirror they wouldn't be able to shatter or ignore. Every person who looked me in the eyes and chose silence over truth was going to see themselves in it. And when it was time, I wouldn't raise my voice. I wouldn't throw fists. I'd just hold it up. Let them watch their own reflection, twist and shame, and walk away. Because the only thing crueler than betrayal is being forgotten by the one you once controlled. And I was done being controlled. I was going to turn their favorite lie into their most public memory. There's something sacred about silence when you're building something in secret. I stopped trying to get their approval, stopped chasing explanations. I stopped asking why Mira did it, why Silas did it, why my parents let it happen. I stopped needing anything from any of them because I had something more powerful now. Evidence. It didn't scream, it didn't weep, it didn't lie. It just existed clean, cold, undeniable. The folder I named Truth sat on my encrypted drive like a sleeping beast. And every night I fed it. I fed it screenshots, bank transfers, surveillance clips, audio files. I didn't even flinch anymore when I heard Myra's voice on those recordings. Soft and sweet, telling Silas, "He's so easy to manage." Or when Silas laughed and said, "You'll be rid of him soon enough." They didn't know I had a PI with motion-triggered cams hidden at the vineyard cabin. They didn't know I knew Myra's burner phone password. They didn't know that their private texts had been auto-forwarding to a backup account for months. The folder didn't just contain betrayal. It documented how deeply they underestimated me. There was a receipt for a $12,000 watch Silas now wore, the one I saw sparkle under the restaurant lights at a family dinner. But using my joint account, Mira had labeled it gift for vendor. Vendor, I guess in her eyes. Silas was just another transaction. There were emails from my father's office wired directly to Myra's shell business consulting fees, the memo said. But Mira hadn't consulted on anything in her life, unless you count manipulating every room she walked into. They've been paying her to stay quiet to help Silas keep control of the vineyard, of the family image of me. But what none of them realized was while they were building a fantasy, I was documenting a conspiracy, and I wasn't going to expose them in court. That would have been too kind. I was going to do it at dinner on my birthday. At the table, they were dressing up like a trophy case. They wanted wine and toast and soft laughter. I'd give them wine, and I'd burn every lie with a toast of my own. It started with a call to a friend I hadn't spoken to in years. Victor Lau, contract lawyer, high-functioning genius, and the only man I'd ever seen bring a CEO to tears with just 3 lines in a boardroom. I emailed him a fraction of the folder, just the money trail and the surveillance footage. He called me 20 minutes later. "What do you want?" he asked. I leaned back in my chair. "I want to bury them in the truth." He chuckled darkly. "Then you're going to need 2 things. A paper trail so tight it could hang a judge and a venue. I have both." "Then I'll be there," he said, "and I'll bring a few friends." Next was securing the location. Mira thought she picked the restaurant. She hadn't. I bought it. Not all of it, of course. Just a controlling share in the holding company that leased the venue. All done through a proxy firm. They still listed the same name on the papers. So, she didn't blink when the confirmation came through. She just smiled and told me, "I'm glad you're letting me take the lead on this." I nodded. "It's your party." But it wasn't. It was mine. She just didn't know the guest of honor was going to be the truth. The week before the dinner, I finalized the layout. The table was long and narrow, good for sightlines. Projector installed behind the bar. Hidden cables, remote setup. Each chair tagged with a small silver envelope slipped beneath the napkins. Each envelope contained a curated truth tailored to the recipient. My father's envelope. Why are receipts in the memo he signed approving them? My mother's. A type transcript of her voice during a brunch I secretly recorded where she said, "If Mira finds happiness with Silas, is it really cheating?" My sister's envelope contains screenshots of her text messages mocking me to Mira, calling me emotionally slow and too loyal to notice. Even Nina got one. A flash drive with the video of her vineyard comment, followed by audio from another night where she called me a background character in his own life. Everyone would be seated, everyone would be served, and everyone would learn the truth with dessert. But the most delicate package was for Mira. I stared at that one the longest. It contained the timeline, the full layout of the affair from the first secret message to the first shared hotel room, the receipts, the cabin video stills, her voice on a call to Silas saying, "Once he signs over the vineyard, we'll ghost him." And finally a copy of the divorce agreement. Signed, notarized, bulletproof with a clause freezing all her access to assets pinning fraud review. The last page, a letter I wrote, just 1 paragraph. "You didn't just betray our marriage. You betrayed my silence. And that was the last thing holding this family together. Happy birthday to me." I sealed it, stamped it, placed it on her side of the table. There was only one task left. The staff. They had to be perfect. Cyrus delivered. Every server was vetted. Some were actors, some were former private contractors. One was a litigation videographer. They all looked the part, polished, efficient, unthreatening. But every tray they carried, every glass they poured, every napkin they folded, it was all theater. The waiter pouring Silas's wine was also carrying the mini projector remote in his pocket. The hostess who welcomed guests at the door. She was the one who would dim the lights when I gave the signal. And Enzo? He'd be in the corner, silent, calm, carrying a USB that mirrored the folder on my drive. Redundant copies, failsafes, proof locked in 7 places. By the night before the dinner, everything was in place. I sat alone in the study, sipping a whiskey I'd saved for something meaningful. The room was quiet. The city outside was glowing in soft yellows and blues. Mara was upstairs on the phone. I didn't care who it was anymore. I just sat there letting the silence settle, not out of sadness, but peace. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like myself again. Not the husband, not the shadow behind Silas, not the joke they whispered about, just me. And when the folder called Truth was finally complete, I renamed the backup. I called it his last gift because that's what it was. The last thing I'd ever give Mira, the chance to look at the man she thought was blind and realize he'd been wide awake the whole time. Forgiveness. That was the word she used. "I'm so glad you forgave me," Mira whispered one evening, curling her fingers around my wrist like she was clinging to something gentle. Not everyone would be so open-minded. I nodded slowly, letting the warmth of her hands sit on my skin like frost, cold, even when it looked like affection. I just told her what she wanted to hear, that I had grown, that I wanted to be less rigid, that maybe she was right. Maybe love needed to be flexible in this day and age. She had no idea I was quoting her word for word from a message she sent to Silas 2 months ago. He just needs to evolve. Once he forgives me, it'll be easy. I didn't forgive her. I didn't even hate her. I had moved past both. What I was doing now was something else entirely. I was being graceful, deliberate. It's the grace you give before you cut the final thread. Not out of cruelty, but precision. I played the part well. Every morning I kissed her forehead. Every night I asked how her day went. I scheduled therapy sessions for us, sessions that didn't exist. I paid an old college friend to pose as the therapist on the call logs. Mara didn't question it. She loved the illusion of progress. It made her feel noble, like she had rescued a lost husband from the edge of emotional fragility. She called me stronger now. She told me she was proud of me. And every time she said those words, I smiled, because I knew the storm was getting closer. It wasn't rage that kept me going. It was clarity. See, rage fades, but truth stays sharp even in silence. Especially in silence. I began spending more time with Silas, too. That was her idea. Said it would help rebuild the bond between brothers. Said it was important for her to see us united. She didn't know I had already recorded a full conversation between them. One where Silas said, "He's soft. He wants to be liked too much. He won't leave you. He needs you." The man was sitting on a landmine and didn't even know it. So I met him for drinks. We sat across from each other at a whiskey bar downtown. Dim lights, leather booths. He ordered the most expensive bottle like always and flashed his teeth like a man used to taking things that didn't belong to him. "You look better," he said, swirling the amber in his glass. "Like you finally let go of the weight." I nodded. "You were right, Silas. I needed to grow up." He grinned, smug and stupid. "Told you. Life's too short for being sentimental." I pretended to agree. He went on about business, about real estate, about the vineyard. My vineyard, as if it were already his. I asked him for advice, let him lecture me. I let him believe he'd finally won the prize he'd been circling since I was 13. It's funny how people will show you exactly who they are if you act like you're not a threat. He even clink-decked his glass against mine to starting over. I lifted mine slowly to grace. He laughed. "Whatever helps you sleep at night." The irony was I was sleeping better than I had in years. Each night I took another breath of freedom, and each morning I added another nail to the coffin they were building for themselves. Mara started making new plans, new vacations, talked about Paris in the spring, talked about looking at new properties with better views. I let her talk, let her dream, let her believe this marriage was getting stronger, because when it ended, I wanted her to feel every inch of the fall. She even asked if we should renew our vows. I nearly choked on my coffee, but I smiled, leaned in, kissed her temple and said, "Only if we write them ourselves." She clapped her hands like a teenager, excited and full of fake innocence. I watched her that night as she typed something on her phone under the covers. Her screen barely visible, probably telling Silas that things were going smoothly, that I was melting. And maybe I was, but not for her. I was melting the mask I'd worn for too long. One day I walked into the room while she was on the phone with her sister. She quickly muted it, tried to wave me off like she was saying something trivial. I said nothing, just smiled, walked over, brushed a strand of hair from her face and kissed her forehead. She looked touched, vulnerable, like the guilt was trying to seep in. But I wasn't offering forgiveness. I was offering her one last act of grace. Not for her benefit, for mine. See, when you know what someone's done, really done, it's easy to be calm. Their power over you disappears. Their lies turn hollow. Their affection becomes noise. The only thing that matters is your decision. And I'd made mine. The last thing to prepare was myself. I stood in front of the mirror the morning before the dinner. The suit hung sharp on my frame. Navy crisp white shirt. A black tie mirror had bought me years ago, saying I looked like a man with purpose when I wore it. I fixed the collar, adjusted the cuffs, took a long look at myself. Not the version of me they liked. Quiet, agreeable, forgettable. The real one. The man who remembered everything, who felt everything, and who decided enough was enough. Downstairs, I opened the drawer in the study, pulled out the final copy of the letter I'd written her. Read it once, mirror. Grace isn't weakness. It's power that doesn't need to shout. You mistook my silence for softness. Now you'll learn what it sounds like when a man speaks with truth. Love, the husband you tried to rewire. I folded it, slid it into her envelope right on top of the divorce papers. Then I walked outside, letting the late afternoon sun hit my face. The world felt louder somehow, but I was quiet and ready. Tomorrow, they would all sit at a table decorated in gold with glasses full of champagne and mouths ready to praise themselves. They would toast to maturity, to modern love, to progress, and I'd smile just one more time. Then I'd break the silence, and they'd finally understand what grace really looks like. The sky was painted in soft streaks of pink and orange when we arrived. Mara loved timing things like this. She said golden hour made everything more photogenic. Her words, not mine. She stepped out of the car like she was descending onto a runway, adjusting her gold dress while smiling just enough to seem effortless. She glanced at me once, her eyes shining. "You ready?" she asked, as if this was just another celebration. I smiled back. I've never been more ready. She didn't know that by the end of the night, she'd never wear that dress again. We walked into the restaurant through a private entrance. The lights were soft. The scent of lavender and age would floating through the air. Every little detail was elegant, subtle, intentional. Her vision, she called it, but the execution that was mine. Our guests were already arriving. My parents were seated near the head of the table. My sister and cousin Nina were chatting by the wine bar. Silas was fashionably late, as always. I watched Mira skin the room like a proud host, checking on the seating, the music, the lighting. Everything was going to plan, just not hers. The servers moved smoothly through the space, offering drinks, adjusting place settings, smiling politely. No one questioned their presence. Why would they? They were dressed the part, polished, coordinated, professional. But they weren't waiters, not a single one. The man serving wine, ex-litigator turned legal researcher. The woman arranging the napkins. A freelance court reporter who'd spent a decade in deposition rooms. The guy pouring water and nodding at each guest. Enzo, my quiet ace, former surveillance contractor, now playing a role in the final act of this very public performance. Each of them had a task, a cue, and all of it revolved around the signal, the one I'd give when it was time. I moved slowly through the room, shaking hands, pretending to laugh. My mother gave me the same tired, "You've always been such a quiet boy," smile. My father clapped my shoulder and slipped me a birthday card that felt more like a contract renewal than anything from the heart. Silas finally arrived, unbothered as usual. He gave Mira a kiss on the cheek that lingered half a second too long. No one batted an eye. They never did. It was part of their twisted little dance. I greeted him with a smile and a nod. "You clean up well, brother," he said, smirking. "Thanks. So do you," I replied, watching the gold watch I bought him flash under the lights. He took a seat directly across from me. Of course he did. He always had to sit across from me as if we were in constant competition, even now. Mira gave a small speech before dinner began. Nothing dramatic, just a few sweet lines about love and growth and how grateful she was for the people around us. She glanced at Silas more than once. When she finally sat, I raised my glass, pretending to toast along with the others. I waited for the main course to be served. The room buzzed with low. I leaned over to the man clearing my appetizer plate, Enzo, though to the guests he was just another server, and whispered, "Now." He gave a tiny nod, then calmly stepped back and disappeared toward the bar. The music shifted first. The jazz in the background faded into silence. A soft mechanical click followed as the hidden projector screen began to lower behind the head table, subtle enough to seem accidental, until it wasn't. People looked up, confused, then curious. Myra's brow creased. "What is that?" she asked, leaning toward me. Before I could answer, Enzo appeared again, this time not with a wine bottle but a sleek black remote in hand. He cleared his throat, voice calm but commanding. "Mr. Walsh," he said, addressing me formally. "Would you like to begin?" I nodded once. He pressed the button. The screen flickered to life and the live finally started to crack. The first slide was simple. A photo. Mira and Silas. My vineyard. Her in the blue dress. His hand too familiar on her waist. Silas's eyes went wide. Myra's jaw tightened. Murmurs rippled through the room. Then came the audio. Myra's voice first, laughing. "He still thinks I hate going to the vineyard. He has no idea we've been using it like our little getaway." Then Silas. "He's soft. He's used to being ignored. He'll never say anything." The laughter that followed chilled the room. I stood slowly, adjusting my sleeves. "I wasn't going to say anything," I said quietly, but the room hushed. I thought maybe I could move past it. I thought maybe I could forgive what happened once or twice. But then I realized this wasn't just betrayal. It was a partnership. I turned toward Mira. "You planned this dinner to show off your version of healing," I said. I planned it to reveal your version of the truth." She looked stunned, like the air had been knocked from her lungs. "This isn't a game," she whispered. "No," I agreed. "It's an audit." Enzo passed around the envelopes one by one. My father opened his first, his expression shifting from confusion to fear as he scanned the wire transfer locks. My mother opened hers, reading the transcript of her own voice from that brunch, her lips parting in slow realization. Na blinked at the still shots and dates as darting around the room as if looking for a place to hide. Silas didn't open his envelope. He stared at me. "You're insane," he muttered. I nodded. "You're welcome to call your lawyer, but I'd recommend doing it before dessert." Mira finally looked at her envelope. She didn't open it right away. "Why?" she asked. Her voice cracked. I stepped toward her. "You once said I was a loyal dog who wouldn't bite. You laughed about how I'd never find out. You said I was easy to manage, and maybe I was, but I was never blind." She opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was her letter, her timeline, the divorce papers, and at the very bottom, a copy of the prenup clause she forgot I'd updated 2 years ago. After a discussion about shared loyalty, she'd broken every part of it. Her access to everything frozen, her credibility collapsing. Silas rose from his seat, clenching his fists. "You've ruined everything." I turned to him calmly. "No, I just stopped letting you ruin me." He lunged forward, but 2 of the waiters blocked him. Enzo's team. "Sit down, Mr. Walsh," one of them said. "Coolly, or we'll be forced to escort you out." My family didn't know what to say because for the first time they weren't in control of the story. I was. I walked back to my seat, lifted my glass. "To truth," I said. Then I drank it down and left them there, mouths open, hands shaking, facades crumbling, just like I planned. There's a special kind of silence that follows shame. It's heavier than guilt, sharper than anger. It hangs in the air like static before lightning, clinging to the skin, crackling in the throat. That's the silence that filled the room the moment the video started playing. First came the text messages projected in bold, glowing clarity against the sleek white wall behind us. "Silas, he's dull. He doesn't challenge her. Honestly, I think she's settled, Mirror. I know. I used to think he'd grow into something, but he's just background noise." Background noise. I stood at the far end of the table, facing them, watching their eyes as the words they thought would stay private now stared back at them like ghosts. No one said a thing, not a gasp, not a protest, just silence. Then came the second slide, a video footage from my vineyard, the hidden camera positioned perfectly beneath the edge of the patio railings. Silas and Mira laughing, drinking wine, holding each other like a couple on vacation. Her voice echoed across the room. "He still doesn't know. It's almost pathetic." Silas leaned in, his mouth on her neck, his tone smug. "He'll never find out. He's too soft." The room tensed. I saw Na's face go pale. My sister looked down at her plate like it might explain something. Even my father shifted uncomfortably, his mouth pressed into a flat, grim line. And my mother, she was reaching for the remote, desperate to stop it. But Enzo was already there. "Don't," I said calmly. "Let it play." She froze. Because there's no dignity in denial when the truth is right there, clear, unfiltered, in high definition. The next video clip rolled in like thunder. Mirror again, this time in our bedroom talking on the phone. She was lying on our bed, twisting the hem of her shirt between her fingers. "I keep telling him I'm going to therapy," she said into the speaker. Meanwhile, Silas and I are planning our escape. Once the vineyard paperwork clears, we'll ghost him. There it was. Her entire plan, her voice, her face, her betrayal. Everything captured, logged, and time-stamped. My rear's hand flew to her mouth, not in sorrow, not in regret, in panic. Because she didn't expect this, not from me, not from the man she called safe. My lawyer, Victor, rose from his seat in the corner. He'd said maybe 5 words all night. But now, with the projector still rolling, he stepped forward. He cleared his throat, not loud but firm enough to cut through the silence. "Mira," he said, "you'll be hearing from us regarding multiple counts of marital fraud, misappropriation of funds, and conspiracy to commit asset transfer under false pretenses. A full forensic audit has been initiated." Mira blinked at him, then at me. You're doing this to me?" she whispered. "No," I replied. "You did this. I'm just letting the lights come on." Silas shot up from his chair. "This is insane," he barked. "You think any of this will hold up in court?" Victor tilted his head slightly, calm as ever. "The documents have already been filed. You'll be receiving copies by morning. But you're welcome to continue speaking. Just know that this entire room is under legal observation." That shut him up. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. Because betrayal doesn't just come from lovers. It also comes from blood. I turned to my father and slid an envelope across the table. He stared at it like it was poison. "Open it," I said. He didn't move. So, I opened it for him. Inside, a single-page DNA results. I looked him straight in the eye. "You always said I wasn't like you," I said. "Turns out, you were right." The silence cracked. Gasps, a fort clattered. My mother looked between the paper and my face like she was seeing a ghost. My father said nothing, not even a denial, because he knew. And that silence was its own confession. "You were never proud of me because I wasn't yours," I said. "But I still gave you everything. My respect, my loyalty. I thought maybe one day I'd be enough." I shook my head, but I was chasing something that was never real. My voice didn't rise. It didn't shake because I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake and free. I turned back to Mira. "You used my silence to write your story," I said. "You thought I was too dull, too slow, too blind. But I wasn't." I was patient. She stood slowly, her body shaking. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." "That's the problem," I replied. "You never thought I mattered enough for it to go anywhere at all." She reached toward me. "Please, we can talk." "Not here, not like this." But there was nothing left to talk about. Everything that needed to be said had been said on tape, on paper, in her own words. And now it was hers to carry. I turned to the rest of the room. "My silence," I said, "was never consent." I glanced at my mother. "You raised me to be quiet, to be small, to never make a scene. But all that did was make me invisible and easy to betray." My sister opened her mouth to speak, but I raised my hand. "I don't need apologies," I said. "I don't want excuses." I walked toward the door slowly. "Enjoy the rest of the evening," I said. And just as I reached the exit, I paused, one last glance over my shoulder. "My birthday wish," I said with a soft smile. I just wanted to be seen. Then I walked out. And this time, no one followed me. They didn't call the next morning. Not Mira, not Silas, not my parents. No one. It was like the dinner never happened, like it was just a strange bad dream they were trying to sleep through. But denial only lasts so long. Eventually the smoke clears and you're left with the ruin, not just ash, but the shame of what you helped burn. The first call came on the third day. Mirror. I let it ring. 10 minutes later she texted, "Please, we need to talk." I didn't know you'd go this far. Go this far? I stared at the message, not sure whether to laugh or throw my phone into the sea. They'd gone further, much further. They didn't just cheat on a husband. They orchestrated an arrangement fed by my own bloodline. They fed the fire and then dared to act shocked when it burned the house down. I never replied. That same evening, my mother sent a long email titled, "Let's talk like family." I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I already knew the rhythm of her justifications. She talked about how emotions are complicated, how we don't always choose who we love, and how sometimes silence is an act of protection. But silence is not protection. Silence is permission. They knew what Silas and Mira were doing. They all knew. Every dinner, every glance, every whisper behind closed doors, they knew. And they chose to do nothing. No, worse, they helped. My sister texted the next day. I didn't know it was that serious. I'm sorry if I contributed to your pain, if that word, that coward's word. I didn't respond to her either. Instead, I went back to work. Not corporate work. My work. The kind I'd been building quietly in the background. A podcast, a blog, a digital journal of sorts, where I can speak freely without being talked over by people who only valued my silence. I called it The Betrayal Beneath the Silverware. The title made people curious. The content made them stay. I didn't use real names. I didn't need to. The story was what mattered. I told people what it felt like to be erased while everyone smiled at your table. What it meant to be loved in front of guests but dismissed in private. What it cost to stay loyal in a room full of traitors. I didn't scream into the mic. I didn't rant. I spoke plainly, carefully, like I was documenting a storm that had already passed. And that's what drew people in. Within 3 weeks, it went viral. Emails poured in. Men, women, strangers who had lived through their own betrayal, their own polite destruction, thanking me for telling a story they thought only existed in their heads. The irony? I became more visible in the aftermath than I ever was at home. It turns out people want the truth, not the polished version, not the one dressed in fine linen and expensive wine. The real one. Meanwhile, Myra's world started crumbling. The consulting business she ran on paper was flagged for financial inconsistencies. Why? Because I'd reported it quietly through a third-party firm I used to work within risk management. Her accounts were frozen within a week. She tried to log in from 3 different devices, all denied her new apartment. Yes, she'd moved out, days after the dinner was leased in her name, but the deposit came from our joint marital account, which now had a legal freeze pinning the divorce proceedings. Silas? He was being investigated by our Vineyards Investor Board. The board I no longer sat on, but still had stock in. You'd be surprised how many hands you can move without ever stepping into a meeting. They called me 2 days after the dinner. "Is it true?" one of the investors asked. I emailed them the proof. His resignation followed shortly after. Apparently, it's hard to stay on as a public partner when your scandal is trending under Golden Boy Gone Gray. Even my father reached out, though he didn't say much. He showed up at my office unannounced, looking older than usual. His face was drawn like he hadn't slept in days. "I didn't want this to happen," he said. I didn't offer him a seat. "You didn't want it to be exposed," I corrected. He didn't argue, just looked down at the floor like it might offer a script he hadn't prepared. "I never thought you'd go public." I raised an eyebrow because you thought I was too loyal to ever speak. He looked away. "You wanted me to stay silent," I said. "That's all this ever was. You wanted to protect your image, not me. You made us all look terrible," he said. "No," I replied, stepping closer. "You made yourselves look terrible. I just stopped cleaning the mirror." He didn't say anything after that, just walked out. I watched him go, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I owed him anything, because I didn't. That's the thing about being the quiet one, the good one, the one who always keeps the peace. No one notices when you leave the table, until you flip it over. I moved out of the family home soon after, took only what was mine: books, clothes, documents. The rest I left behind. Let me keep the silence she loved so much. I settled into a small place overlooking the coast. Nothing grand, but peaceful and honest. The first morning there, I made my own coffee, watched the sunrise without anyone telling me to pose for it. And I breathed, not the shallow breaths I'd learned to survive on, a full one, deep and slow and real. The kind that fills your lungs with a future. I still get messages from people I used to call family. Some angry, some apologetic, some just confused. But I don't answer them anymore. They want closure. I already have mine. Because the truth is, I didn't burn the family down. They did. I just refused to put the fire out this time. I used to think the consequences were cruel. That to enforce boundaries, to hold someone accountable, was an act of violence. That silence was more virtuous than confrontation. That walking away was too dramatic, too permanent. But I don't believe that anymore. Consequences aren't cruel, they're honest. They're the final form of truth when words are wasted and apologies are dressed in manipulation. And now, Mirror was living in hers. Her business, the one she used my name, my network, and my credit to build, was under audit. Investigators traced every consulting payment that my father funneled into her account. Most of them were unreported. Some had come from shell companies linked to Silas. She tried to spin it, of course. Claimed it was all above board. Claimed I was doing this out of spite. But it's hard to argue with timestamps, voice recordings, and fraud alerts. Her brand partnerships dropped her. Clients walked. Her name, once wrapped in glitter, was now stuck to the word embezzlement on a growing number of legal filings. Silas didn't fare much better. He was used to skating by. Money could buy silence, charm could buy forgiveness. But this wasn't a barroom scandal or a minor tabloid rumor. This was business, public, documented. One of the vineyard's major investors filed the lawsuit. Another pulled out completely. His reputation, so carefully curated for years, collapsed like wet paper under weight. He tried reaching out to me twice. The first time was a voicemail. No apology, just a condescending lecture. "This doesn't make you look strong. It makes you look bitter. You need to grow up." I saved it. Might use it for a podcast episode later. The second time he showed up at my office. He didn't make it past the front desk because I no longer worked in the office. I had stepped down from the board, sold my shares at their peak value, and invested in something that felt like mine. Not legacy, not inheritance. Mine. A studio downtown where I recorded my podcast. A quiet writing room. A space for people to come and talk. Unfiltered, honest, human. I called it the Echo Room because echoes never lie. They just reflect the truth back in your own voice. The first in-person gathering I hosted was a storytelling night. People came in, sat in a circle, and told the moment they realized someone they loved no longer saw them as real. There were tears, laughter, long silences. It felt like healing, not the kind wrapped in slogans or workshops, the kind that grows in the spaces where lies used to live. Meanwhile, Myra's circle thinned. Her sister blocked her. Her own friends stopped inviting her out, afraid she might beat the next story. Funny how quickly people retreat when the mask slips. She sent me a letter one afternoon, a thick envelope handwritten. Inside was 3 pages of soft words. Regret, nostalgia, phrases like, "I didn't mean to lose you, and I just wanted to feel chosen again." At the bottom, she wrote, "You didn't deserve this. You were the most gentle thing in my life. I mistook that for weakness." She asked to meet. I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, because I was done. See, some things are forgivable, but betrayal by design isn't one of them. She didn't trip into Silas's arms. She mapped the fall. She orchestrated the silence. She sat across from me for months, calling it growth while planting seeds of deception in my own soil. And I watered them with patience, with hope, with grace, until I realized I wasn't gardening a marriage. I was tinning a graveyard. So no, I didn't meet her. I burned the letter quietly alone because not everything needs an audience. Sometimes closure is simply choosing peace and not announcing it. My mother tried harder. She left voice notes long once, talking about legacy, family, forgiveness. She wanted to fix the narrative, stitch the threads back together before the world saw the unraveling too clearly. But I wasn't interested in repairing illusions. She once told me family means protecting each other even from the truth. I used to believe her. But that wasn't protection. That was complicity. So I replied for the first and only time just one line. Love without accountability is just a performance. She didn't message again. The divorce was finalized 2 months later. Clean, precise. The house was sold, the assets divided as per the updated prenup. She tried to appeal, failed, tried to delay, denied, and then just silence. Not the kind I used to know, not the suffocating kind that made me doubt my worth. This silence was mine, peaceful, earned, and I filled it with better things. I walked every morning along the coastline, letting the ocean remind me that movement doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. I read again, cooked, laughed with strangers who became friends. And every so often, someone would recognize my voice from the podcast and say, "Thank you." Not for the scandal, not for the drama, but for the truth. Because truth, when Spock, you just speak, that meant something to me because I had spent years crying inwardly, privately, making sure no one ever saw the cracks. No, I let them show, and I've never been stronger. Some people say I was cruel, that I humiliated my family, that I planned their shame. But here's what they don't understand. I didn't create their betrayal. I just refused to carry it anymore. I stopped being the secret keeper, the peacekeeper, the one who swallowed the fire so others could eat in comfort. And when I finally opened my mouth, I didn't spit flames. I held up a mirror. They burned themselves on the reflection. So, no, consequences are not cruel. They are clarity. They are what happens when silence finally stops being mistaken for permission. And now I live out loud. I speak freely. I breathe deeply. I laugh fully. And most of all, I look in the mirror and say, you weren't weak. You were surrounded by people afraid of your strength. And now that they can't silence it, they finally hear it.